In the treacherous waters of the Caribbean, where legends are born in blood and salt, one woman's capture by ruthless pirates ignites a storm that will shake the seven seas. They thought she was just a fisherman's daughter. They were catastrophically wrong. When black sails appear on the horizon and the ocean's most feared predator arrives to claim what's his, even sharks flee in terror. The morning sun painted Port Charlotte's weathered docks in shades of gold and amber as Eleanor Gray knelt beside her father's fishing net, her slender fingers working through the coarse rope with practice. At 24, she had spent her entire life in this humble Caribbean village, where the salt air clung to everything and the constant rhythm of waves provided the only music most folks would ever know. Her golden hair, bleached lighter by countless hours under the merciless sun, fell in a simple braid down her back, and her modest blue dress bore the stains of honest labor. "Eleanor, those nets won't mend themselves while you're daydreaming," her father called from the boat, though his weathered face held a gentle smile. Thomas Gray had raised his daughter alone after the fever took her mother 15 years ago, and he'd never remarry. Eleanor was his world, his reason for rising each dawn to face the dangerous seas. "I'm not daydreaming, Papa," she replied, but her blue eyes betrayed her. They drifted toward the horizon where endless water met endless sky. And somewhere beyond that line existed a world she'd only glimpsed in whispered tavern tales, a world of black sails and fearless men who answered to no king or country. A world where one particular captain had stolen her heart 3 years ago during a chance encounter that changed everything. The village knew Thomas Gray's daughter as a quiet, obedient girl who attended church every Sunday and never caused trouble. What they didn't know was that hidden beneath the floorboards of their modest cottage lay a leather-bound journal filled with letters written in a bold, masculine hand. Letters signed simply MB letters that spoke of distant shores, incredible dangers, and a love that defied every rule of proper society. Captain Malachi Blackwood commanded the largest pirate fleet in Caribbean waters, with 7 ships under his flag and a reputation that made Royal Navy admirals lose sleep. They called him the Black Sovereign, the scourge of the Spanish Main, the man who'd never lost a battle or broken his word. And he'd sworn an oath to Eleanor 3 years ago, when he'd found her stranded after a hurricane destroyed her father's boat. He'd saved them both, and in those 3 days aboard his flagship, the Crimson Vengeance, she'd seen beyond the terrifying legend to the complicated man beneath. Their engagement remained secret, it had to be. Blackwood's enemies numbered in the hundreds, and any woman publicly associated with him became an immediate target. So Eleanor waited, living her simple life, trusting that when the time came, he would return for her as promised. She wore his ring on a chain beneath her dress, a thick gold band engraved with a compass rose that pointed always toward true north. Toward him, ship approaching. The cry from the village watchtower shattered the peaceful morning like cannon fire. Eleanor's heart leaped. Could it be him? But as she shaded her eyes and looked toward the harbor entrance, her hope turned to ice, and the vessel cutting through the turquoise waters flew no colors, its sails a dirty gray, its hull bearing the scars of countless battles. This wasn't Malachi's proud flagship with its crimson and black sails. This was something far worse. "Pirates!" her father breathed, his face draining of color. "Eleanor, run! Get to the church, bar the doors." But it was too late. Boats were already lowering from the mysterious ship, filled with armed men who rowed toward shore with disturbing efficiency. These weren't the romanticized pirates of stories. These were predators, their faces marked by cruelty and their weapons stained with rust that might have been dried blood. The village erupted into chaos as families scattered, trying desperately to reach safety. Eleanor grabbed her father's arm, pulling him toward their cottage. But a rough hand seized her braid and yanked her backward with brutal force. She cried out as she stumbled, falling hard onto the dock's wooden planks. "Well, well," a voice dripped with malice above her. "Look what we have here, boys. Fresh as the morning catch." Eleanor looked up into the scarred face of a man who might have been handsome once, before violence and vice had carved away his humanity. He wore the remnants of a naval quartermaster's coat, now filthy and torn, and his breath reeked of rum even at this early hour. Behind him, a dozen pirates spread through the village like a plague, grabbing whatever and whoever caught their interest. "Please!" Eleanor gasped, trying to pull free. "We have nothing of value. We're just fishermen, nothing of value?" The quartermaster laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "I'd say those golden locks are worth a pretty penny in certain ports, and that face?" He grabbed her chin roughly, forcing her to meet his bloodshot eyes. Captain Vane's always looking for fresh entertainment. "You'll fetch a fine price." "No!" Her father lunged forward, but a pistol to his temple sent him crashing down, blood streaming from his scalp. Eleanor screamed, fighting against her captor with sudden desperate strength, but he was too strong, too experienced. Within moments, her hands were bound with coarse rope that bit into her delicate wrists. As the pirates dragged her toward their boats, Eleanor's fingers found the chain around her neck, the hidden ring pressing against her skin like a promise. "Hold on," she thought desperately. "Malachi, wherever you are, please hold on." The pirate ship stank of unwashed bodies, stale rum, and something darker that Eleanor refused to identify. They'd thrown her into a cramped hold with 3 other captives from Port Charlotte, all of them silent with terror as the vessel's timbers creaked and groaned around them. Above, heavy footsteps and harsh laughter marked the crew's celebration of their successful raid. Eleanor's mind raced through 1,000 desperate plans and discarded each one as hopeless. These weren't honorable men who followed the pirate code. They were sea rats, the kind of vermin that even other pirates despised. The kind who took what they wanted and left only death and ashes in their wake. Her father's unconscious form haunted her thoughts. Was he even alive? Had they left him bleeding on those docks? Or had they shown mercy? The thought of Malachi consumed her. Where was he now? Somewhere in these same waters, commanding his fleet with the absolute authority that made strong men tremble. Did he sense somehow that she needed him? Their connection had always felt deeper than mere words could explain, as though the ocean itself carried messages between their souls. "On your feet, Golden Girl?" The hold's door crashed open, and rough hands hauled Eleanor up the narrow ladder toward blinding sunlight. She emerged onto the main deck where the entire crew had gathered in a loose circle. At their center stood Captain Vane himself, a tall, rail-thin man with eyes like chips of dirty ice and a smile that belonged on a corpse. "Gentlemen," Vane announced, spreading his arms theatrically, "we've had a profitable morning. Good haul of supplies, a bit of gold, and this lovely creature to brighten our days." His gaze crawled over Eleanor like something with too many legs, "but I'm afraid she's proved rather uncooperative. Bit my quartermaster quite viciously, in fact." The crew laughed, a sound that made Eleanor's skin crawl. She stood as straight as her bound hands would allow, refusing to show these monsters her fear. If these were to be her final moments, she would face them with the dignity her father had taught her. "In my experience," Vane continued, circling her slowly, "there's only one cure for an uncooperative spirit. A little swim with the local wildlife tends to improve attitudes remarkably." "Bring the plank," Eleanor's heart stuttered. The plank. She'd heard stories, terrible stories whispered in taverns about this particular torture. They would make her walk out over the water, bound and helpless, until she dropped into the waiting jaws below. The Caribbean teemed with sharks, everyone knew that. They followed ships like loyal dogs, waiting for scraps, waiting for opportunities exactly like this. 2 pirates wrestled a long wooden plank into position, extending it out over the ship's rail. Below, Eleanor could see the crystal-clear water and, God help her, the distinctive fins already circling. 3, 4, 5 sharks, drawn by some instinct that told them feeding time approached. "Any last words, Golden Girl?" Vane pushed her toward the plank space, his fingers digging cruelly into her shoulder. "Perhaps a prayer? Though I doubt the Almighty pays much attention to these particular waters." Eleanor's hand found the chain at her neck one final time, clutching the hidden ring like a talisman. "You're making a mistake." she said quietly, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "A terrible mistake. The only mistake here is yours, darling. You should have been more accommodating." Vane shoved her forward onto the plank. The wood felt slick beneath Eleanor's bare feet. How had she lost her shoes? Each step took her further from the relative safety of the deck, further toward that impossible drop. The plank bounced slightly with her weight, sending ripples through the turquoise water below. The sharks responded immediately, their circling growing tighter, more agitated. They knew. Somehow, they knew. "Keep walking." Vane's voice carried cruel amusement. "Unless you'd prefer my men throw you in, I assure you, the result will be the same." Eleanor reached the plank's midpoint, then 3/4. The end approached with horrible inevitability. Below, the largest shark broke the surface briefly, its black eyes seeming to look directly at her, its mouth opening to reveal rows of triangular teeth designed for tearing flesh from bone. This is how it ends, Eleanor thought with strange clarity. Not in her father's cottage surrounded by grandchildren, not in Malachi's arms aboard his flagship, but here, in nameless waters, at the hands of men whose names she didn't even know. She took one final step, felt the plank's end beneath her toes, and closed her eyes. "Malachi, forgive me for not being stronger, for not waiting as I promised. Sails!" The cry from the crow's nest shattered the moment like a pistol shot. Black sails off the starboard bow. Multiple vessels closing fast. Eleanor's eyes snapped open. The entire crew rushed to the rails, their torture forgotten as they stared toward the horizon. And there, cutting through the water like avenging angels, came a sight that made even these hardened criminals step back in instinctive fear. 7 ships in perfect formation, their black sails emblazoned with a crimson compass, rose. At their lead, the largest and most fearsome vessel ever to sail Caribbean waters. The Crimson Vengeance had arrived, and at her helm stood a figure Eleanor would have recognized across any distance, in any darkness. Captain Malachi Blackwood had come for his bride. Time seemed to slow as Eleanor teetered on the plank's edge, watching those black sails grow larger with impossible speed. Blackwood's fleet moved like a single organism, cutting off every possible escape route with mathematical precision. This was no chance encounter. This was calculated warfare performed by the most skilled naval commander in these waters. "All hands." Vane's voice cracked with sudden panic. "Battle stations. Load every cannon, it's Blackwood." The name rippled through the crew like a physical force. Men who'd laughed moments ago at a helpless woman's terror now scrambled with genuine fear etched across their faces. Because everyone knew the stories. Everyone knew what happened to ships that crossed the Black Sovereign. They never made port again. They simply vanished into the deep, and when wreckage washed ashore weeks later, it bore marks that suggested their crews had learned exactly what displeasure meant. "Get that girl off the plank!" Vane grabbed his quartermaster by the collar. "If she's important to Blackwood, she's our only leverage. Move!" But the quartermaster never reached Eleanor. The Crimson Vengeance drew alongside with a maneuver that should have been impossible. She was too large, too fast, the angle too sharp. Yet there she was, her massive hull looming like a floating fortress. Her decks lined with over 100 armed pirates whose discipline put Royal Navy crews to shame. And at the helm, standing with absolute stillness amidst the chaos, Captain Malachi Blackwood finally revealed himself in full daylight. At 42, he was a force of nature wearing human skin. His black hair, streaked with premature silver, hung in thick locks past his broad shoulders. His beard trimmed closer than most pirates wore, but still wild enough to frame his strong jaw, gave him the look of an Old Testament prophet, if prophets carried twin sabers and radiated controlled violence. He wore no coat despite the sun's heat, just a white linen shirt open to mid-chest, revealing bronzed skin marked by scars that told stories of 25 years at sea. Gold glinted at his ears, around his neck, on his fingers. Not the gaudy display of a nouveau rich merchant, but the earned wealth of a man who'd taken more ships than most pirates had sailed on. Tattoos marked his forearms, a compass, an anchor, coordinates that supposedly marked his first kill, though Eleanor had never asked about that. But it was his eyes that commanded attention. Dark as midnight, they held depths that could be tender or terrible depending on his mood. Right now, looking at Eleanor balanced above shark-infested waters, those eyes promised violence on a scale that would make history. "Captain Vane!" Blackwood's voice carried across the water without him needing to shout. It was the voice of a man accustomed to absolute obedience, the voice that had commanded fleets and negotiated with governors and sentenced men to fates worse than death. "You've made an error in judgment, Blackwood." Vane tried for bravado, but his voice shook. "This is none of your concern. This girl is a legitimate salvage, taken in a legal raid." "Legal?" Blackwood's laugh held no humor whatsoever. "There's nothing legal about your existence, Vane. You're a stain on waters I consider my territory. But I might have let you skulk away to whatever hole spawned you. Might have, until you touched what belongs to me." Eleanor's heart hammered against her. She wanted to call out to him, but her voice had abandoned her. Below, the sharks sensed the tension, their circling growing more frenzied. "The girl means nothing." Vane gestured wildly. Take her, and let us go in peace." "Peace?" Blackwood finally moved, descending from his helm with the fluid grace of a predator. His crew parted like water before him, maintaining perfect discipline despite the imminent violence. "You forfeited peace when you put your filthy hands on my fiancé." The word dropped like a cannonball. Vane's face went slack with comprehension and terror. Around him, his crew started backing away, some already eyeing the water as if drowning might be preferable to what was coming. That's impossible," Vane stammered. "She's just a fisherman's daughter." "She can't be. Get her off that plank." Each word from Blackwood carried the weight of an executioner's blade. "You have 3 seconds before I demonstrate why they call me the Scourge." But Eleanor didn't wait for Vane's response. The moment Blackwood had spoken her truth aloud, strength flooded back into her limb. She turned carefully on the narrow plank, meeting his eyes across the distance. In that gaze she saw everything: his rage at her captors, his fear for her safety, his pride in her courage, his absolute certainty that he would fix this. "Malachi!" she called, and his whole body tensed at hearing his name from her lips. "I'm all right. The plank splintered beneath her. Whether from her movement or the ship's rocking or simple rotten wood, it gave way completely. Eleanor had one instant of weightlessness, one heartbeat to see Malachi's face transform into something beyond rage, beyond fury, into a primal roar that would haunt her dreams forever. Then she hit the water, and the sharks turned as one toward the impact. But Malachi Blackwood was already moving. In the single second it took Eleanor to orient herself in the warm Caribbean water, her captain dove from his own ship's deck in a perfect arc. He hit the water like a missile, his saber still in his hand, and before the nearest shark could close its jaws, he was there. What happened next, Eleanor would remember for the rest of her life. Blackwood didn't just fight the shark, he dominated it. His blade flashed in the refracted sunlight as he drove it upward through the predator's lower jaw, through its mouth, into its brain. Dark blood bloomed in the water, and the other sharks, sensing death, scattered in primitive fear. Strong arms wrapped around Eleanor's waist, pulling her against a familiar chest. "I've got you," Malachi murmured against her soaked hair. "I've always got you." Above, his crew had already thrown lines. Within moments, they were both hauled aboard the Crimson Vengeance, dripping seawater and blood onto polished decks. Eleanor collapsed against Malachi, her whole body shaking with delayed shock, while he held her with one arm and kept his blade pointed at Vane's ship with the other. His captain, his first mate, appeared at his elbow, Josiah Cross, a scarred veteran who'd served with Blackwood for 15 years. "Your orders?" Blackwood's dark eyes never left Vane's terrified face. When he spoke, his voice carried to both ships, ensuring every man heard the decree. Captain Vane, you and your crew violated the code by torturing an innocent. You threatened a woman under my protection. Those crimes carry only one sentence. He paused, letting the moment stretch. Your ship is forfeit. Your men may take the boats and row for the nearest port if they make it. But you tried to feed my woman to sharks, so I'm giving you the same opportunity. No. Vane backed away from his own rail. Please, Blackwood, please. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. That's your mistake, not mine. Blackwood gestured, and his crew moved with terrifying efficiency. Grappling hooks secured both vessels together, and Blackwood's pirates swarmed across the gap like an avenging tide. Within 5 minutes, Vane stood alone on his own deck, his entire crew having wisely chosen boats over loyalty. Malachi gently set Eleanor on her feet, keeping one hand on her waist to steady her. Wait here, love. This won't take long. Malachi. Eleanor caught his arm, her blue eyes searching his face. Don't, please. He's not worth it. For a moment, something soft flickered in those dangerous eyes. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, his calloused thumb brushing away seawater and tears. Some lessons need teaching, Eleanor, so others remember what happens when they mistake kindness for weakness. He kissed her forehead gently. Cover your eyes, love. Eleanor turned away as Malachi crossed to Vane's ship. She didn't watch as the notorious pirate captain gave his final orders. She didn't listen to Vane's screaming plea, but she heard the splash and then the thrashing, and she knew that the sharks had found new prey. Knew that by tomorrow, every pirate in the Caribbean would hear this story. Knew that no one would ever make the mistake of threatening her again. When Malachi returned, he was covered in seawater, but not blood. He'd kept his hands clean while still delivering his message. That was the difference between him and men like Vane. Malachi never enjoyed violence. He simply wielded it with absolute mastery when necessary. It's done, he said quietly, pulling her against his chest. Around them, his crew efficiently stripped Vane's ship of anything valuable before setting it adrift. You're safe now. You'll always be safe. I swear it on every life I've taken and every treasure I've stolen. No one touches what's mine and lives to speak of it. Eleanor pressed her face against his solid shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent of sea salt, leather, and something uniquely him. My father, already aboard the Raven's Wing, Malachi assured her, referring to one of his escort vessels. My surgeon's tending his wound. He'll be fine, Eleanor. They both will be. Everyone you love is under my protection now. The weight of what had just happened crashed over Eleanor like a wave. She'd walked the plank. She'd felt death inches away. And then her pirate captain had come for her, had killed to save her, had revealed their secret to the entire Caribbean because protecting her mattered more than strategy. The whole world knows now, she whispered against his chest. Everyone knows I'm yours. Malachi's arms tightened around her. Good. Let them know. Let every pirate and privateer and naval commander from here to the Carolinas understand that you're the only thing in these waters I consider sacred. Let them know that anyone who harms you signs their own death warrant. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, his expression fierce and protective and utterly uncompromising. I'm done hiding you, Eleanor. I'm done pretending you're not the only port I'll ever call home. As the Crimson Vengeance's black sails filled with wind and the legendary fleet turned toward the open sea, Eleanor finally understood the full truth. Being loved by the ocean's most dangerous man meant accepting that safety was an illusion. But it also meant never facing the darkness alone. And as she stood on that blood-stained deck in the arms of her captain, she realized she wouldn't have it any other way. The sharks had been fed. The message had been sent. And Eleanor Gray, simple fisherman's daughter, had become something far more dangerous. The woman who held Captain Malachi Blackwood's savage heart. The captain's quarters aboard the Crimson Vengeance were nothing like Eleanor had imagined during those 3 years of waiting. Rich mahogany paneling gleamed in the lamplight. and maps covered every available surface charts of currents, trade routes, hidden coves that only the most experienced sailors knew existed. Through the stern windows, she watched the rest of Blackwood's fleet maintaining perfect formation. 7 ships moving as one deadly organism across darkening waters. Malachi stood at his desk, still shirtless, examining reports his first mate had delivered. Eleanor studied him properly for the first time since the rescue, the breadth of his shoulders, the way candlelight caught on the gold chains at his neck, the intricate compass tattoo that wrapped around his left forearm. Every scar told a story of survival. Every muscle spoke of decades commanding ships through impossible situations. "You're staring," he said without looking up, a hint of amusement in that deep voice. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm allowed to stare at my fiancé, aren't I?" Now he did look up, and the intensity in those dark eyes made her breath catch. 3 years I've waited to hear you say that word where anyone could hear it. 3 years of secret letters and stolen moments in hidden ports. He moved around the desk with predatory grace. "Do you understand what you've become, Eleanor? Every enemy I've made, and I've made hundreds, now knows exactly how to hurt me. I know the risks." Eleanor lifted her chin, meeting his gaze steadily. "I knew them 3 years ago when I accepted your ring. I knew them today when I refused to show Vane my fear. I'm stronger than you think, Malachi. I know exactly how strong you are, love." His calloused hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness. "That's what terrifies me. You're brave enough to stand in a world that will devour you if I show the slightest weakness." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "They'll test me now. Other captains, privateers, even the Royal Navy. They'll all want to prove that Great Blackwood has a vulnerable point. Then we prove them wrong." Eleanor caught his hand, pressing it against her cheek. "Together. Isn't that what you promised me? That we'd face everything together?" Malachi's expression softened in a way few people ever witnessed. This was the man beneath the legend, the one who'd held her through a storm 3 years ago and confessed that she was the first person in 2 decades who'd made him want something beyond the next horizon. "I promised you many things. A life of adventure. Freedom most women never taste. But I also promised I'd keep you, and today I nearly failed that promise." "You didn't fail anything. You arrived exactly when I needed." Eleanor stepped closer until she could feel his body heat. "You dove into shark-infested waters and killed a predator with your bare blade. That's not failure, Malachi. That's the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed." "Magnificent," he laughed darkly. "Most women would call it barbaric. Most women aren't marrying the most feared pirate captain in the Caribbean." Eleanor's fingers traced the anchor tattoo on his chest. "I knew who you were when I fell in love with you. I'm not asking you to be different. I'm asking you to let me stand beside you." Before Malachi could respond, urgent knocking shattered the moment. "Captain!" Josiah's voice carried through the door. "We've received a message by swift boat. Royal courier. It's complicated." Malachi's entire demeanor shifted instantly from lover to commander. "Enter." Josiah stepped inside, his scarred face grave. He held a sealed letter bearing an unmistakable royal crest. "It's from Prince Edmund, Captain, the bastard prince of House Carmichael. He's requesting an audience." Eleanor felt Malachi tense beside her. Requesting or demanding? The wording is polite, but the implication is clear. He's anchored at Nassau with 3 warships. Claims he has a business proposition that would benefit us both. Josiah's expression showed exactly what he thought of that claim. But there's more. He specifically mentions having seen a golden-haired angel during our encounter with Vane's crew. His spyglass was apparently quite good. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eleanor watched Malachi's jaw clench, watched his free hand move unconsciously toward his saber. He saw her, from his flagship positioned 3 miles east. "We didn't detect them until after the situation was resolved." Josiah looked genuinely apologetic. "They're flying peaceful colors, Captain. Technically, we can't engage without provocation." "Provocation." Malachi's laugh held no humor. "Prince Edmund Carmichael is walking provocation. He's legitimate, which makes him untouchable by normal standards. But his reputation with women. He didn't finish the sentence, but Eleanor heard what he didn't say. What does this prince want? Eleanor asked quietly. Both men looked at her as if they'd forgotten she was there. Malachi's expression went carefully blank. Nothing you need concern yourself with, love. Josiah, send word that Captain Blackwood appreciates His Royal Highness's interest, but must respectfully decline any meeting at this time. He anticipated that response, Captain. Says if you don't meet him willingly, he'll be forced to report certain illegal activities to the Royal Navy. Activities involving a particular Spanish merchant fleet 3 months ago. Eleanor watched Malachi's control fracture slightly, just a flash of pure rage before he locked it down. Whatever Edmund knew, it was dangerous enough to force compliance. In this world, even legends had to occasionally bend to political power. Set course for Nassau, Malachi finally ordered. But Eleanor stays aboard the Vengeance, guarded by our best men. Whatever this peacock prince wants, he won't lay eyes on her again. Nassau Harbor bustled with activity as the Crimson Vengeance dropped anchor among legitimate merchant vessels. Eleanor watched from the captain's quarters as Malachi prepared for his meeting with Prince Edmund. His usual open shirt replaced by a proper black coat embroidered with gold thread. He looked every inch the dangerous privateer playing at civilization. I still don't like this, Eleanor said for the 3rd time. Something feels wrong about this prince specifically requesting to meet you right after seeing me. Everything about Edmund Carmichael is wrong. Malachi checked his weapons with practiced efficiency, saber on his left hip, pistol on his right, knife in his boot. He's the king's bastard son, given a title and worships to keep him occupied. But he's got a reputation for collecting beautiful things, artwork, jewels, women. His dark eyes met hers, especially women. Eleanor's stomach nodded with understanding. He wants to trade for me. That's his proposition. He can want whatever he likes. You're not negotiable. Malachi crossed to her, his large hands framing her face. Listen carefully, Eleanor. If anything goes wrong, if you hear fighting, if this ship comes under attack, Josiah has orders to sail immediately. He'll take you to Tortuga, to a woman named Captain Isabella Reyes. She owes me several favors, and she'll keep you safe until I can retrieve you. And what about you? Eleanor grabbed his wrists, sudden fear flooding through her. What if this is a trap? What if he plans to arrest you? Then I disappear into these waters like I've done 100 times before. He kissed her forehead gently. But I don't think that's his game. Edmund's too greedy for simple justice. Whatever he wants, it'll be something that benefits him directly. He pulled back, his expression hardening. Stay inside these quarters. Don't go on deck. Don't let anyone except Josiah or me through that door. Promise me. I promise. Eleanor caught his hand as he turned to leave. Malachi, I love you. Whatever happens in that meeting, remember that. Something flickered in his eyes, vulnerability quickly masked. I've faced Spanish armadas and Royal Navy blockades. I've survived hurricanes and mutinies and battles that should have killed me 10 times over. But nothing terrifies me more than loving you in a world this dangerous. He kissed her palm. I'll be back before sunset. Then we sail for Tortuga, and I'm marrying you properly. No more waiting, no more hiding. The whole Caribbean already knows you're mine. Time to make it official. After he left, Eleanor tried to occupy herself with the books lining his shelves, but concentration proved impossible. Through the windows, she watched Malachi and 6 of his men row toward the docks where Prince Edmund's escort waited. Even from this distance, she could see the prince's ostentatious clothing. Purple velvet and Caribbean heat, gold trim catching sunlight. Hours crawled past. Eleanor paced the cabin, studied maps she didn't understand, examined Malachi's collection of navigational instruments. Sunset approached, painting the harbor in shades of orange and still no sign of his return. Then Josiah burst through the door without knocking, his face grim. We need to move, now! Eleanor's heart stopped. What happened? Where's Malachi? Edmund arrested him, Claims he has evidence of crimes against the crown witnesses, documents, the works. Josiah was already grabbing emergency supplies from hidden compartments. It's complete fabrication, but Edmund's got the authority to hold him for trial in Jamaica. Could be months before we even get a hearing. No. Eleanor felt ice spreading through her veins. There's more. This is about me, isn't it? Josiah hesitated, then nodded grimly. Edmund made Malachi an offer. Release you into his custody for protection during the trial, and the charges mysteriously disappear. Refuse, and Malachi Haynes for piracy. The cabin seemed to tilt. Eleanor grabbed the desk for support, her mind racing through impossible options. What did Malachi say? Told Edmund to go to hell in considerably more colorful language. Then Edmund's guards took him into custody. Josiah moved toward the door. We're leaving. Captain's orders are clear. Get you to Tortuga immediately. No. Eleanor's voice came out stronger than she felt. We're not running. Miss Gray, the captain was very specific. I don't care. Eleanor straightened, feeling something shift inside her. She'd been the humble fisherman's daughter for 24 years. She'd been Malachi's secret for 3 more. But now, standing in this cabin aboard the most feared ship in the Caribbean, she realized she could be something else entirely. Something worthy of a pirate captain's fierce love. Send a message to Prince Edmund. Tell him I'll agree to meet with him. Privately. Absolutely not. The captain would have my head. The captain is in chains because of me. Eleanor met Josiah's eyes steadily. Edmund wants to use me as leverage. Fine, let him think he's won. But he's about to learn that I'm not some helpless prize to be traded. I'm Eleanor Gray, future wife of Malachi Blackwood, and I'm done being protected. She paused. Besides, you said Edmund wants beautiful things. Well, I think it's time the prince got exactly what he asked for. Understanding dawned on Josiah's scarred face. You're planning something. I'm planning everything. Eleanor's smile held none of her former innocence. Now, tell me everything you know about Prince Edmund Carmichael. And someone find me a proper dress. If I'm meeting royalty, I should look the part. Prince Edmund's private quarters at the governor's mansion reeked of expensive perfume and barely concealed arrogance. Eleanor sat across from him in borrowed silka deep blue dress that Josiah had procured from some mysterious source, her golden hair arranged in an elaborate style that made her look older, more sophisticated, more like the kind of woman who belonged in a prince's world. Edmund himself sprawled in his chair like a man without a care, his purple velvet coat unbuttoned, his handsome face marred by cruelty around the mouth. I must say, Miss Gray, you're even lovelier up close. That golden hair is quite extraordinary, like spun sunlight. His gaze traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Wasted on a common pirate, wouldn't you say? Eleanor forced herself to smile demurely. Captain Blackwood is many things, Your Highness, but common is not among them. Ah yes, the famous Captain Blackwood, the scourge of the Caribbean, the Black Sovereign. Edmund waved his hand dismissively. Impressive titles for a man now sitting in my dungeon. Rather diminishes the legend, don't you think? Perhaps? Eleanor leaned forward slightly, noting how his eyes dropped to her neckline. Men like Edmund were predictable. Or perhaps it demonstrates that even legends must sometimes yield to proper authority. Which is why I've come to discuss your generous offer. Edmund's smile widened. My offer? I'm afraid I made my offer to Blackwood, and he rather rudely declined. Malachi is proud, stubborn. He'd never agree to trade me for his freedom because he believes that makes him weak. Eleanor kept her voice soft, vulnerable. But I'm not Malachi. I'm just a fisherman's daughter who's found herself in a situation far beyond her understanding. These past few hours, I've realized something important. Pirates like Blackwood can offer adventure, but they can't offer safety, security, a real future. She watched Edmund lean forward, hooked. Go on. If I agreed to your protection willingly, without coercion, would you truly release him? Let him sail away without charges? My dear girl, I would do more than that. I would ensure he never bothers you again. Edmund stood, moving to a side table where crystal decanters gleamed. You deserve better than a life of running and hiding. You deserve comfort, respect, admiration from society. He poured wine, bringing her a glass. I could provide all of that. A woman of your beauty could want for nothing. Eleanor accepted the wine, but didn't drink. And what would you require in return? Simply your company. Your presence at social functions, perhaps eventually. He let the implication hang, but I'm a patient man. I understand this is all very overwhelming. We could start slowly, let you adjust to your new circumstances. You're very generous, Your Highness. Eleanor set down her untouched wine and stood gracefully. There's just one problem with your kind offer. Edmund's smile faltered slightly. Problem? You assumed I came alone. Eleanor's demure expression melted into something sharp and dangerous. You assume that because I'm a fisherman's daughter, I must be helpless. You assume that loving a pirate captain means I haven't learned anything from him these past 3 years. The door burst open. Josiah led a dozen of Blackwood's best men into the room, weapons drawn. Edmund's guards lay unconscious in the hallway beyond, dealt with silently while the prince had been distracted by golden hair and silk. What is the meaning of? Edmund's outrage died as a blade touched his throat. Malachi Blackwood stepped from the shadows behind the prince's chair, his dark eyes blazing with barely controlled fury. The meaning, Malachi said quietly, is that you made 3 mistakes tonight, Edmund. First, you thought Eleanor was bait you could use against me. Second, you thought your title made you untouchable. Third, you failed to secure your own dungeon properly. Your guards are remarkably susceptible to bribes. You can't do this. Edmund's voice rose with panic. I'm a prince of the realm. Touch me and the entire Royal Navy will hunt you down. Will they? Malachi pressed the blade a fraction closer. Tell me, Edmund, does the king know you've been using your warships for personal slave trading? Does he know about the fortune you've been skimming from colonial taxes? Or about the governor's daughter you ruined last year before paying her family to stay quiet? He smiled coldly. I've been operating in these waters for 25 years. I know where every body is buried, metaphorically and literally. Particularly yours. Edmund went very still. What do you want? You're going to sign a document stating that all charges against me and my crew were fabricated. You're going to return to Jamaica and tell your superiors that the famous Captain Blackwood was impossible to locate. And you're going to ensure that my name never appears in official reports again. Malachi's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Because if I ever hear you've spoken Eleanor's name, if I ever see your ships in waters I consider mine, if you ever make the catastrophic error of crossing me again, I will ensure those secrets reach your father's ears. And we both know that even bastard princes can be disowned when they become embarrassing liabilities. You're bluffing, am I? Malachi nodded to Josiah, who produced a thick folder of documents. I've spent 3 months gathering evidence on you, Edmund. Started the moment I heard you'd been assigned to Caribbean patrol. Because men like you always have skeletons, and I always prepare for contingency. He removed the blade from Edmund's throat, but kept it visible. Sign the papers. Walk away. Live to collect your ill-gotten fortunes another day. Or refuse, and watch your entire life collapse. 20 minutes later, Eleanor stood on the Crimson Vengeance's deck watching Nassau's lights fade behind them. Malachi joined her at the rail, his arms sliding around her waist naturally. That was dangerously reckless, he said without heat. Walking into Edmund's quarters alone, trusting that my men could secure the mansion, betting everything on timing and distraction. I learned from the best. Eleanor leaned into his solid warmth. You've spent 3 years teaching me through your letters how pirates think, how they plan, how they turn weaknesses into weapons. Did you really believe I wasn't paying attention? I should have known. Malachi turned her to face him, his expression caught between exasperation and admiration. You played Edmund perfectly, made him think he was winning right until the moment he realized he'd already lost. He underestimated me because I'm female and common-born. Most people will make that same mistake. Eleanor traced the line of his jaw, which gives me an advantage few pirate captains' wives will ever have. You're not my wife yet. Malaki's thumb brushed across her lips. But that changes tomorrow. Captain Isabella at Tortuga is ordained to perform marriages at sea. We'll arrive by dawn, and by tomorrow's sunset, you'll be Eleanor Blackwood properly and legally. His dark eyes held hers. Last chance to change your mind, love. This life I'm offering isn't gentle or safe. It's storms and battles and constant danger. I don't want gentle or safe. Eleanor pulled him down until their foreheads touched. I want you. I want this ship and this crew and this impossible life we're building together. I want mornings watching the sunrise from these decks and nights falling asleep to the sound of waves. I want everything, Malachi. The adventure, the danger, the absolute certainty that I'll never be bored for the rest of my life. Then you'll have it. Malachi kissed her with 3 years of longing and 1 day of terror and infinite promise for their future. Around them, his crew tactfully busied themselves with evening duty, though Eleanor suspected many were grinning in the darkness. Everything I am, everything I've built, everything I'll ever conquer, it's all yours. From this moment until the sea finally claims us both. As the Crimson Vengeance cut through dark waters toward Tortuga, Eleanor Gray looked toward the horizon where dawn would soon break. Somewhere ahead lay her wedding day, her new life, her future as the woman who'd tamed the Caribbean's most dangerous heart. Behind them, Prince Edmund was learning an expensive lesson about underestimating fishermen's daughters. And beneath the waves, sharks still circled, eternally waiting for their next meal. But Eleanor had learned the most important lesson of all. In Malachi Blackwood's world, the greatest predators weren't the ones with teeth and fins. They were the ones with black sails and absolute loyalty, sailing forever toward the next horizon where adventure waited, and she wouldn't have it any other way.